My fiancée slept with 3 groomsmen. The night before our wedding, so I played the security footage during her vows and watched her collapse in front of everyone. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I thought I was marrying the woman of my dreams. Her name was Natalie. Beautiful, magnetic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone else fade into the background. I met her at a friend's engagement party, and from the moment she laughed at one of my dumb jokes, I was gone. She had this way of looking at you like you were the only person who mattered, and for a guy who'd spent most of his life blending into the crowd, that feeling was addictive. We started dating soon after, and everything felt easy. Late-night phone calls turned into sleepovers, and sleepovers turned into weekends spent planning a future together. She wasn't just my girlfriend, she was my partner, my motivator. When I got promoted at work, she showed up at my place with champagne and takeout, saying, "You're not just successful, you're the guy I always knew you'd become." I remember thinking, this woman believes in me more than anyone ever has. Our friends called us the power couple. My parents adored her. Every photo we posted got flooded with comments like, "You two are goals." I'd never felt prouder or luckier. The proposal was straight out of a movie. Fairy lights, music, the works. When she said yes, she cried, and so did I. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But looking back now, I realize I ignored the small cracks. The way she'd flirt a little too comfortably with waiters, or how she'd bask in the attention of any man who looked her way. I told myself she was just confident, just social. I wanted to believe she loved me the same way I loved her, fully, fiercely, without games. I was wrong, and the proof of that was waiting for me months later in the most devastating way imaginable. The engagement high lasted for months. Every morning, I'd wake up next to Natalie and feel like I'd won some kind of emotional lottery. But as the wedding planning began, something in her shifted. She became obsessed with every detail, every photograph, every perception. "This wedding has to be perfect," she'd say, scrolling through Pinterest boards until 2 in the morning. "People are going to talk about it for years." At first, I thought it was excitement. I wanted her to have the day she'd dreamed of. But soon it wasn't about us. It was about her image. She'd stress over how her dress looked in different lighting or how my suit didn't photograph masculine enough. When I laughed it off, she'd snap, "You don't understand. This isn't just a wedding, it's our brand." That word, brand, stuck with me. It didn't sound like love. It sounded like marketing. Her friends, and even some of mine, started getting pulled into her orbit. My college buddies, Tyler, Chris, and Brandon, were all groomsmen, and Natalie made sure they were included in every planning event. "They're part of your side," she'd say, but somehow she always ended up hanging around them more than I did. Group chats buzzed late at night, full of jokes I wasn't in on. I'd glance over her shoulder and catch Tyler's name more often than I wanted to admit. One night, I said quietly, "It feels like you're closer to them than to me." She didn't even look up from her phone. "You're being paranoid," she said flatly. "They're your friends, not mine. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you'd realize that." I apologized. I always apologized. I told myself it was just wedding stress, that every couple hits bumps before the big day. But a small, bitter voice inside me whispered something I didn't want to hear. Maybe this wasn't stress. Maybe it was a preview. And I had no idea just how right that voice would turn out to be. As the wedding drew closer, the tension in my gut became harder to ignore. Everyone else saw a fairy tale engagement. I was starting to feel like a guest in my own relationship. Natalie was constantly surrounded by my groomsmen, laughing at inside jokes I wasn't part of, whispering with them during rehearsals, touching their arms a little too easily. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, but every time she'd look at me with that practiced smile and say, "You trust me, right?" I'd feel something inside me flinch. Jake, my best man since college, was the first to call it out. One night, we were folding invitation cards at my apartment when he said, "Man, I don't know how to say this, but something's off with Natalie and the guys." I looked up, defensive. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, then muttered, "It's the way they look at her, and how she lets them." His tone wasn't judgmental. It was protective. But I snapped back, "You're overthinking it. She loves me." I said it more to convince myself than him. Still, Jake's words stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I couldn't unsee. Natalie's phone was always face down. She'd laugh at random texts and say, "Oh, it's just wedding stuff." Once, I heard her on the phone whispering, "Don't worry. He won't find out." When I asked who it was, she brushed it off with a laugh. "My cousin. You're acting paranoid again." That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her soft breathing. My chest felt heavy. I wanted to believe she was the woman I proposed to, the woman who said she couldn't wait to spend forever with me. But that voice in my head, the one I'd silenced before, was growing louder now, and soon I'd learn just how right it was. The week before the wedding felt like a blur of excitement, exhaustion, and denial. Families started arriving in town, the venue was decorated, and Natalie was glowing, posing for pictures, managing vendors, laughing like nothing was wrong. She seemed so untouchable. I kept telling myself that maybe I was overthinking everything, that once we were married, all the doubts would fade. But something deep inside me, something primal, kept whispering, "Watch closely." The bachelor and bachelorette parties were scheduled for the same night. I remember joking, "Don't get too wild," and she smirked. "You should be telling yourself that." She looked radiant in that white dress as she left with her friends. I watched her car disappear into the night and felt a strange chill crawl up my spine. My guys and I headed to a nearby resort. Jake was there, trying his best to keep things light. We laughed, drank, told old stories, but every time my phone buzzed, I found myself checking if Natalie had texted. She hadn't. Hours passed. Around midnight, Jake stepped outside for air. When he came back, his face was pale. "Dude," he said quietly, "I just saw Natalie." "She's here." I laughed it off. "She's at her bachelorette party." He shook his head. "No, I saw her. With Tyler, Chris, and Brandon." I froze. My first thought was denial. "You're drunk." "I'm not," he said firmly. "She went into one of the suites with them." I tried to call her. No answer. I texted, "Everything okay?" But the message never delivered. My stomach turned as a sick realization settled in. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my hotel room staring at the ceiling, her last words echoing in my head. "You trust me, right?" By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it destroyed me. The sun hadn't even risen when I drove back to the venue. The world outside felt unnaturally still, the kind of silence that comes before something breaks. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, a dull ache pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I knew I couldn't just stand by and pretend nothing happened. The venue staff were setting up floral arches and table linens when I walked in, trying to smile like a groom should. Inside, I was dying. I approached the overnight security guard, a middle-aged man named Tom, and told him I wanted to review the security footage from the resort grounds. "We had a disturbance last night," I lied, forcing my voice to sound calm. "Just want to make sure everything's secure before guests arrive." Tom hesitated, but eventually led me into the small security room filled with screens. My pulse was hammering in my ears. As the footage played, I saw her, Natalie, in that same white bachelorette dress giggling with Tyler, Chris, and Brandon. They stumbled through the hallway toward one of the suites, hands brushing, eyes wild with alcohol and adrenaline. I watched her turn back once, glancing around like she knew she was crossing a line. Then she disappeared into the room. I wanted to shut it off. I wanted it to be fake. But there it was. The woman I loved, wrapped around my friends like what we had meant nothing. My throat burned and my body went cold. I didn't even realize I was gripping the chair so tightly until my knuckles turned white. When the footage ended, I sat there staring at the blank screen. Tom whispered, "You okay, son?" I nodded, even though my world had just imploded. I walked out into the early morning light, numb. The wedding was in 6 hours. Everyone was expecting a celebration, but all I could see was betrayal replaying in my mind, loop after loop. And in that silence, I made a decision that would change everything. By the time the sun fully rose, I felt hollow, the kind of emptiness that doesn't scream, it just hums quietly beneath your skin. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked dead, but somewhere under that numbness, something cold and sharp started forming. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. I had two options: call off the wedding and face a storm of questions, pity, and chaos, or stay silent and let her expose herself in front of everyone. I chose the second. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the humiliation I felt watching that footage. Jake found me in the parking lot pacing. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded. His jaw tightened. "We can end this right now. Just tell everyone." But I shook my head. "No," I said, my voice calm, too calm. "She's going to marry me today, and she's going to destroy herself in the process." The hours that followed were surreal. I moved like a ghost through the motions, getting dressed, greeting relatives, forcing smiles. Everyone kept saying how happy I looked, how lucky I was. I wanted to laugh in their faces. Natalie arrived later, radiant in her gown, glowing with fake joy. When our eyes met, she gave me that same confident grin that used to make my heart race. Now it just made my stomach turn. Before the ceremony, I slipped away to the AV booth and handed a small USB drive to the tech guy. "Play this during the vow montage," I said casually. He didn't question it. Nobody did. As the guests began to arrive and the music started playing, I took a deep breath. Natalie had no idea that the day she'd spent months perfecting would soon become her worst nightmare. And all I had to do now was wait. The ceremony began just as the afternoon sun spilled golden light through the glass windows of the chapel. Guests filled the seats, smiling, whispering, snapping photos. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. Natalie stood at the entrance, her white dress glimmering like a weapon. I should have been breathless at the sight of her, but all I felt was dread. As the music started, she walked down the aisle, slow and graceful. Her eyes locked on mine. I forced a smile because everyone was watching. My chest tightened with every step she took, every second of that illusion. Behind her, the groomsmen stood tall, smug, pretending nothing had happened. I could barely look at them without my fists clenching. Jake was beside me, his face pale and rigid. When she reached me, Natalie whispered, "You look nervous." Her voice was honey-sweet. I wanted to laugh. "If only you knew," I replied softly, "just overwhelmed." And she smiled, believing every word. The officiant began talking about love, faith, and trust. The irony hit like a punch to the throat. I stared at her hands, perfectly manicured, trembling just enough to seem emotional. She looked like an angel in front of everyone, a woman people would bet their lives on. Then came the vows. She went first, voice steady, dripping with false devotion. "I promise to love you, to honor you, to be faithful." I felt the room blur around me. Each word was a lie, but no one else knew it yet. I kept my composure, repeating my lines like a man reading his own eulogy. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the guests erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. People cheered. But inside, I wasn't a groom. I was a ticking bomb in a tailored suit. And soon, everyone in that room would see the explosion. The reception hall looked like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and a floral arch that framed the dance floor. Guests were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating what they thought was a love story for the ages. And through it all, Natalie floated like a queen, radiant and untouchable, every movement polished and practiced. To everyone else, she was the picture of happiness. To me, she was a ticking lie wrapped in silk. I played my part well. I smiled for photos, danced when expected, even kissed her forehead when her aunt asked for a picture. Every time her lips brushed my cheek, though, I felt nothing, just the hollow chill of betrayal. Across the room, the groomsmen laughed together, avoiding my gaze. Jake stayed close to me, jaw tight, like he was ready to drag me out if I changed my mind about going through with it. When it was time for speeches, Natalie made hers first, dramatic and charming, thanking everyone for celebrating our forever. Her voice shook in just the right places. She even looked at me with tears in her eyes. I wanted to vomit. Then I stood to speak. My palms were slick with sweat, but my voice came out steady. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "Tonight's about truth, love, and commitment. And I'd like to end the evening with something special. A short video that sums up our journey together." The crowd clapped. Natalie looked thrilled. She turned to me, whispering, "You made a montage?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It shows everything." As the lights dimmed, I felt my heartbeat slow. On the big screen behind us, the opening scene appeared. Our engagement photos, vacations, and laughter, all soundtracked by the same love song she picked. The guests sighed and smiled, enchanted. Then, right as the final chorus faded, the screen glitched. The next clip began to play, and I watched Natalie's face freeze in confusion. She had no idea what was about to hit her. The first few seconds were quiet. Too quiet. The screen flickered, then shifted from our wedding montage to grainy footage from a hallway camera. Guests murmured in confusion. Natalie tilted her head, still smiling, thinking it was some kind of editing mistake. But then she appeared on screen, in her white bachelorette dress, laughing, drunk, holding Tyler's hand. The room fell silent. At first, people thought it was a prank, but as the footage continued, the laughter vanished. There she was, Natalie, stumbling with Tyler, Chris, and Brandon toward the suite door. The timestamp glowed clearly. The night before the wedding. The air in the hall grew heavy. Someone dropped a glass. The sound shattered the tension like a gunshot. "Natalie," her mother whispered, eyes wide. On screen, the four of them disappeared into the suite. Minutes later, the camera caught them sneaking out, disheveled and laughing. The crowd gasped in unison. Every second stretched like eternity. Natalie's face drained of color. She shot up from her chair, shouting, "Turn it off! This isn't real!" Her voice cracked, half fury, half panic. I didn't move. I just watched, calm, detached. "Why?" I asked softly, my voice carrying across the room. "You didn't stop that night." People turned toward me, realization dawning in their faces. The groomsmen shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Jake stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Natalie spun toward me, tears streaming down her face. "Please, stop this." "We can talk," I interrupted, my tone razor-sharp. "No, we won't talk. You made your choices. This is the truth you hid behind your vows." The footage ended abruptly, the screen going black. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Thick, suffocating silence before whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Natalie's perfect world had just collapsed, and I wasn't done watching it. Burn. The silence after the video ended felt endless. Then, all at once, it shattered. Gasps, curses, the scrape of chairs against the floor. Chaos flooded the room like a wave. Natalie stood frozen, her face pale and streaked with tears. "It's not what it looks like," she screamed, her voice echoing through the hall. But no one believed her. Not after that. Her mother rushed to her side, trying to cover her with her shawl like that could hide what everyone had seen. Tyler tried to speak. "It was just a mistake, man." But before he could finish, Jake lunged forward, shoving him back. "You're a mistake," he spat. Guests were recording, whispering, shouting. Someone yelled, "Oh my God, this is insane," while another muttered, "That poor guy." Through it all, I stood still. I wasn't angry anymore, just empty. Watching her crumble in front of me felt like staring at the ruins of something that used to be beautiful. Natalie dropped to her knees, sobbing, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. "Please," she choked out, crawling toward me. "I was drunk. I didn't mean to." I stepped back. "You didn't mean to cheat on me with 3 of my best friends? That's one hell of an accident, Natalie." My voice came out low, controlled. "You vowed to be faithful. You lied while wearing white." The officiant had vanished. Guests began filing out, half in shock, half desperate to escape the storm. I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope. Annulment papers. "I had these ready," I said, tossing them onto the table in front of her. "Just in case my gut was right." Natalie's sobs turned into screams. "Don't do this." "We can fix it." But I was already walking away. Jake followed me to the exit as the chaos erupted behind us, shouting, crying, disbelief. When the heavy doors closed, the noise dulled to a faint echo. For the first time in days, I exhaled. The wedding was over. But the fallout was just beginning. By morning. The entire town knew. Someone had recorded the whole thing. The vows, the video, Natalie's breakdown, and posted it online. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Groom exposes cheating bride during vows was trending everywhere. People dissected every frame, every word. I didn't have to say a thing. The world saw her for who she really was. My phone exploded with messages: sympathy, outrage, curiosity. Old friends called to say they were proud of me for standing my ground. But I didn't feel proud. I felt numb. I hadn't done it for attention or revenge. I'd done it because I couldn't let her walk away smiling after what she'd done. Still, watching strangers turn my heartbreak into entertainment was surreal. Natalie tried to reach out. Calls, emails, even handwritten letters delivered by her sister. Each one was filled with excuses. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. You humiliated me. How could you? That last line made me laugh bitterly. She was the victim now? The hypocrisy almost impressed me. The groomsmen didn't fare much better. Tyler's fiancée dumped him on the spot. Chris's company suspended him after the video surfaced. Brandon moved states away to escape the humiliation. Karma had worked faster than I ever could. I deleted every photo, every message, every reminder of her. My apartment felt emptier but lighter. I started running again, eating properly, sleeping without nightmares. Some nights, though, I'd wake up in a cold sweat, remembering her voice saying, "You trust me, right?" And I'd feel that same quiet ache in my chest. One afternoon, a letter arrived, her handwriting, trembling and uneven. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. It was just one line. If I could undo it all, I would. I burned it. Watched the paper curl and blacken in the flame, and for the first time since the wedding, I smiled. But closure. That was still waiting just around the corner. It took months before life began to feel normal again, if normal even existed after something like that. The first few weeks were chaos. Reporters camping outside my apartment, tabloids calling it the wedding from hell, strangers stopping me on the street to say I was a hero. I didn't feel like one. Heroes save something. I just watched everything I loved burn to the ground. Eventually, the noise faded. The videos stopped circulating. People moved on to the next scandal. But I didn't move on right away. I had to rebuild myself piece by piece. Therapy helped. Long walks helped. So did silence. The kind where you finally stop explaining yourself to everyone and just breathe. Natalie, though. She didn't disappear quietly. I heard she lost her job after the video went viral, her family cut contact, and she moved out of state to start over. Some mutual friends tried to guilt me, saying I'd ruined her life. I didn't respond. She ruined her own life. I just stopped hiding the evidence. One night, months later, Jake and I attended another friend's wedding. The laughter, the toasts, the music. It all felt foreign, like a language I used to speak but had forgotten. Then, during the slow dance, Jake nudged me and said, "You did the right thing, man." I looked around at the happy couples, at the honesty in their faces, and for the first time, I actually believed him. After the reception, I stepped outside. The air was cool, stars scattered across the sky. I stood there for a long time, breathing it all in. No rage, no grief, just peace. I used to think revenge would feel like fireworks, loud, explosive, unforgettable. But it didn't. It felt like this, standing under a quiet sky, knowing I'd finally let her go. Natalie destroyed the life we built, but in doing so, she freed me from it. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back.